The Denver Consent Decree, birthed by the Supreme Court case Keyes v. District 1, Denver, Colorado, has many lasting repercussions which still make the news to this day. The case originated in Denver but made waves nationally as the first desegregation case fought out of the South. I will talk about the beginnings of the case and move towards present day from there. The path to equity is a long road on which many drivers tread. We have made gains, but what is left to travel? The origins begin with Plessy v. Ferguson, the national court case in which facilities could be separate as long as they were equal. This case paved the way towards a segregated society throughout the United States, sometimes with blatant signs, and elsewhere with unspoken racial divides. 5 court cases related to the idea of separate but equal education throughout the nation: Delaware, Kansas, Washington, D.C., South Carolina, and Virginia. All dealt with the same inequitable treatment of minority students. At the time, the focus was African American students, but later this would be expanded to multiple minority groups and their unfair representation. With the death of a Supreme Court justice, Earl Warren became the Chief Justice and decided separate educational facilities were inherently unequal. After the case, many Coloradoans moved from the towns to the suburbs, and middle-class African American families moved to the closer suburbs of the city. This included Park Hill. When one elementary school was opened in the area specifically designed for an African American population, and more resources went to traditionally Caucasian schools, the Keyes family, with some community allies, decided to sue the district in 1969. The case did lead to the desegregation of some schools. This was a big deal because no schools outside of the South had specifically been questioned about segregation practices. Throughout this time, there were riots in Denver streets. The judge's house was bombed, and around 20 school buses were lit on fire, without passengers, of course. Keyes and his family received multiple death threats, and many families moved further into the suburbs to escape the impending desegregation. DPS started fighting segregation with a voluntary student transfer program, but this was soon disbanded. The district court decided any school with a 70% Hispanic or African American population was likely to produce an inferior educational opportunity. Side note, Abraham Lincoln High School has 93% Hispanic population. The mistreatment of minority students in the American education system had already been on the radar years prior to the case. The United States Commission on Civil Rights published a report on Hispanic education focusing on the Southwest, and it determined they often had similar educational discrepancies in their education as Native Americans and African Americans. In 1980, parents of limited English proficient students asked for a better monitoring system, district-wide standards for ELD, and a process to identify students who need services. The resulting settlement created the new Language Rights Order, which was separate from the desegregation order and changed multiple times throughout the next 3 decades. The case was nearly settled in 1999 until the United States came on in the 11th hour and was added as a plaintiff in representation of the Educational Opportunities Act of 1974 to help set up a stronger English language acquisition program. To this day, the Department of Justice and the state visit schools throughout DPS to check their programs and compliance records. As stated previously, many people were unhappy when the trial was underway in the 1970s because they did not support desegregation. Meetings in Park Hill were held to discuss what to do with the incoming population of minority citizens. After the trial, DPS was watched closely for 4 decades and counting. The consent decree determines the ELA program of DPS to be transitional until students can, quote, meaningfully and equally participate in mainstream English classes, end quote. Tinley services, or classes in native languages for Spanish speakers, are additionally offered. The district means to hire as many bilingual teachers as possible and requires teachers to become ELA certified in high ELL populated schools. Instructional Services Advisory Teams, or ISA teams, throughout Denver monitor students and ensure correct placement. DPS has made great gains, but they still have a ways to go to equitably serve their ELL population. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.